right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to 15 Minutes with Lori. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen this morning. I do want everyone to know that the training for the new forms at SLAR, the registration I put in the chat this morning, so you can copy that URL and go ahead and register if you like. It is in person at the board office. These changes are very important, but they're not hard changes like we had last year. The first one I want to talk about is the residential rental listing contract. As we know, the residential sale contract, the residential listing, the special sales contract, all of those fell in line with the antitrust law suit, where the seller was going to pay, is being asked to pay the buyer's agent directly, and it's not going broker to broker. Well, the residential listing and lease did not comply to that. So the changes that they have made fall more in line with that. So on this form here, which is the rental listing contract for residential, you'll see all the strike throughs and the add-ons. So it looks like it's a lot, but the biggest thing is where you see 27, it said cooperating broker through line 35. That's where they were asking the agent to pay the agent instead of the landlord paying the buyer's agent for the tenant. So instead, they added the listing broker compensation instead, just like you see on the listing contract and the residential or the buyer's agency agreement. So it does fall in line with that. I'm going to skip down to the version that is complete. And by the way, as a reminder, these forms are coming out tomorrow. July 1st is tomorrow. So they are coming out tomorrow. They will automatically be uploaded and updated in .loop. But if you have any forms yourself that are in a custom folder, you must change those out, okay? So as you can see on the residential rental listing contract now, it just has the listing broker compensation, and then it asks if the tenant is going to ask for, if the tenant is going to ask the landlord to pay any compensation. On the listing contract, it states whether or not that the tenant is going to pay it. It also has the unrepresented tenant section in it as well. So that all falls in line with the listing contract that we have right now. Does anybody have any questions about that? Okay, I'm going to move along. Most of the forms that are changing have on them the change from selling broker to buyer's broker now. So that's a big change on all the forms that we have. The residential lease, again, falls in line with the same thing that the residential sale contract shows, where the tenant can the tenant can ask the landlord to pay their brokerage the compensation. Okay, so that they added the lines 21 and 22. And then also you've got to add the broker compensation rider specifically for the lease. So just know that there are two separate forms, and one is the broker compensation rider is for the residential sale contract and special sales contract. The broker compensation rider specific to a lease, which is 2109A, that one is going to be used when dealing with a lease from now on, okay? Also, they had to change the numbers on the form as well, okay? Any questions with the residential lease and the residential rental listing contracts? Okay, so then you've got the one that is the sample, and I will be uploading these samples into .loop. Hang on just a minute, Ann. I will be adding the sample into the .loop also, because I know a lot of you, whenever you're doing presentations, you like to bring those along, but it has to have sample written across it. And you had a question, go ahead.
Yes, I'm sorry. On the residential lease and the lease listing agreement, can the agent sign those, or is that still specific to the broker?
Anything that has to do with a listing or a buyer's agency, the brokers would have to sign. So that's a great question. So she's referring to the residential rental listing contract. The managing brokers still have to sign that. Yes, thank you for asking. Okay, so moving along. See if I can find it. So here is the broker compensation rider for the residential lease. It is 2109A. It is pretty much the same, where the tenant can ask the landlord to pay their buyer's broker compensation. Okay. Then new form, which I am actually very happy about, the appraisal notice. It's 2130 is the form number. The reason I like this form is because, as you know, in the past, when the buyer would have an appraisal done, you have to contact the listing agent, probably via phone call and an email, of course, stating whether or not, well, if it did not appraise for the sale price of the contract. So you would just communicate back and forth, phone calls, emails, text messages. Well, now you have an appraisal notice, just like you do with an inspection notice or walkthrough notice or a title and survey notice. So basically, you're going to go back and forth. Part A states that the property did not appraise for the purchase price or higher per the attached appraisal. Buyer proposes the following. So most of the time, obviously, they're going to ask for a lower price. However, this is just a notice, as you know, and it is not attached to the contract. So if you do a notice and there is an agreed upon amount, you still must do an amendment to the sale contract to change that sale price, okay? Because this appraisal notice is not attached to the contract. Does that make sense to everybody? The seller then has the option one. Option B1 states seller accepts buyer's proposed identified in Part A. Appraisal contingency is resolved. Part B, seller declines the buyer's proposal identification in Part A. Or B3, seller declines buyer's proposed identification Part A and makes a new proposal. So you can go back and forth. Now in Part C though, it does give the buyer in C1, buyer accepts the seller's proposed identified in Part B, appraisal contingency is resolved. C2, buyer waives its request in Part A, appraisal contingency is resolved. Or buyer declines seller's proposed identified in Part B, mutual release is attached. Now you do need to follow the deadlines on the sale contract. So, once the buyer receives their appraisal and has been alerted that it may not have appraised, they have two days to get that to the seller stating that it did not appraise. So upon receipt of the appraisal, they have 2 days to get it over. So then, there is a negotiation, but there is a deadline on that. So you're not going to be able to do anything other than that unless it's agreed upon in an amendment to the sale contract, okay? Any questions about that? At the bottom of the notice, you will see that the seller can sign saying seller agrees to satisfy all items originally listed in Part A of the appraisal notice and it's resolved, or the buyer agrees to accept the property without satisfaction of any items originally requested in Part A. So it's kind of similar to that inspection notice where the second page at the very bottom, either party can accept it, the way it is, or the seller can say, yes, I will do everything in Part A that you've agreed upon. So it's kind of similar to that. And they can sign that at any time and it would be resolved, okay? Any questions with that? All right, so one thing I do want to mention to you, in contracts and forms on SLAR's website, you have the ability to do some research before asking the question to the board. So it says here that before you inquire, please do some research. So the facts.realtor or stlouisrealtors.com/pages/contracts and forms. And I will get this out to you so you have it available. So then no phone, they prefer no phone calls. because they get an influx of phone calls. And if you try to call, it's going to be hard to get anybody. So you can email questions to contract updates. My screen is dirty. Contract updates at stlouisrealtors.com. Or you can email suggestions to suggested-forms/suggested-form/. Then obviously we all know that the legal hotline, everyone has access to that. So that's the Missouri Realtor, but they tend to not answer questions on the SLAR forms, more Missouri forms. So just make sure that you do your research first. You can always reach out to the managing brokers to find out more information or ask questions of us, okay? Anybody have any questions? Norm, is there anything you'd like to share this morning? Oh, he's muted. Bill, is there anything you'd like to share this morning?
I think these changes have been coming, and those are the lease, especially the lease ones. I know you and I have both reached out to the board about not having the right things. So this will probably clarify and make sure we got everything documented right. So I do like the appraisal one too, because that by email and stuff like that was.
I agree. I think these are minor changes, but they were important changes for sure. So yeah.
Yeah. And if you guys ever have questions, we're always here to answer those.
Yes. And I see that you have a question.
Yes, I thought one of the changes they were going to make to all the forms was changing the phrase selling agent to buyer's agent, or some form of that.
Yes. So all of the forms that say selling broker right now have been changed to buyer's broker, and that will be update all forms. I'm not going to go through each form, but every form that says selling broker will now say buying broker. Yes, that is correct. And just one more thing on these forms. The forms that we're using right now can be used through the end of the year. Okay, so if you get an offer and you don't see that the new forms are being used, it's okay through the end of the year. However, I encourage our agents to please start using the new forms now. They comply to that antitrust lawsuit, and so it will help protect you and your client for sure. Okay? I'm going to give you all one more minute back in your day. So thank you for joining me at 15 Minutes with Lori. Have a great day, and we'll see you Wednesday.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
You're welcome.